Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As part of today's video on Sitecore Content Hub, I want to show you how we can enable external authentication providers to log in into our uh, Content Hub environment, or even make use of just basic authentication. So let's just get started. And if you want to change the authentication provider for your for an instance, uh, we can you have to go to manage section. So just click on manage the settings here. Okay, so on the manage section you will find we have a page for settings here, so just click on that, and from here you can just search for authentication. So let's just search for authentication here. Right, so we under portal configuration you can find we have this authentication. Just click on that. Right, and here what we can see here is, like, we have different settings which are available for you to configure. And by default, if we just see here, like, we have this enable external authentication, which is set to true, which means, right now for our instance, external authentication is already enabled. And if we scroll down a bit, you can also find that we have these external authentication providers. For now it's just set to SAML, right? So in case, if you want to have something, if you want to have some other providers added to your instance and you want to make use of one of those providers, you can always do that. Another thing to note here is on the external authentication providers, which is now on set to SAML, the authentication mode is set to active. So what does this mean is, if the authentication mode for any of your external provider is set to active, which means you will directly navigate to the login page of your that authentication provider. If this is set to passive, then what you see is, then you will basically land to your login page, and from there you get an option for different authentication provider which are available for your instance, or which you have already configured. So in our case, we just have the SAML, and which is going to your the metadata location is set to stylelabs.eu, or this one. So it will basically redirect us directly to the login page of this particular external provider which you have said, which is SAML in this case. So as of now, you can see, like, this is what we have in under authentication. And we also see that the external authentication is already enabled. Another thing to note here is we also have this enable basic authentication. So this works, let's say you don't have any external authentication, you just want to leverage the basic authentication. So in that case, you need to have your username and password registered directly in the Content Hub environment itself, right? So I also have one of my I'm also using my own credentials, not the SAML one which is configured here, which is making use of the style labs here. I also have my own credentials created directly on this environment, so I'll also show you how basically that works. So for now, let me just make one small change here and make this authentication mode from active to passive, and see what change we see here. So let me just make it passive, and once you make any change here, you just click on save. So setting has been saved now, and let me just log out. Right, another thing to note here is, like, before I log out, like, we have this enable basic authentication which is already set to true, which means ideally we should see two options now. One is our basic authentication, and the second one, which is our external authentication, because this is also set to true, which means we should be able to log in via our external authentication providers also. So let's just save it, and let's just log out. So once you logged out, now you see, right, like, you have your your username and password, which is coming from your basic authentication, plus you also have your sign in with SAML, which is one of your active external authentication provider. Right now, why you are seeing this screen? Because we have set the mode of your provider is to passive, but instead of passive we set it to active, then directly it will take us to the login page of this provider. So what I can do is, I can also try to log in with my just basic authentication. So I have created my own credential, and yeah, so here are my credentials, and let me just click on sign in. Right, so you see, like, I just logged in, and then I'm able to log into this environment. So that is one way, right? So let's just do another thing on the test here. Let's just go back to our authentication, which is under settings. If you go to settings, then search for authentication and just click on that, which is under portal configuration, and let me uh, disable this enable external authentication. So let me just make it false. So right now we see like our external authentication is already been disabled now, and we already have an external authentication set here, which is SAML with the required details on it. But the parent item, like the external authentication itself, is disabled. So which means if we disable this authentication and our basic authentication is enabled, so from here, like if I log in and if I log out and log in again, I should not see any option to connect with this instance via any of the external authentication providers. So let's just save it quickly and just do a logout, and then when we try to log in again, yeah, you see here like we don't have any any other option, which basically we can use to log in again with our right. So here are my credentials and I'm able to log in here. So right, so these are the basic configuration which you can do if you want to make use of any of your authentication provider which you already have set up in your system, or if you want to just create your own credentials directly under your user. Because what you can do is you can directly go to users, create your own user there, set some password for that, and then you can use those credentials to directly log into your instance there. So those kind of things are available for you to log in back to your system. Let me log in again, go to the authentication, and let me just make it true so that I'm able to log in with my external authentication providers also, and click on save. So that's what I just wanted to cover as part of today's video. I think you're clear on how exactly we can make use of the external authentication provider and what settings are required to enable and disable the basic authentication and external authentication providers. In one of our next videos, we will also see how you can configure um, more authentication providers for your reference, and then you can set one of those authentication providers as active, so that whenever you try to log in, it directly takes you to the landing page of that provider. Or else if you add as many providers here, then and if you set the authentication mode to passive, then when you try to log in, then you are going to see your basic authentication, plus you'll have different buttons to basically navigate to your specific provider login screen. Instead of directly going into a specific one, you will see all those logins for you, all those buttons where you can, on click of which, you navigate to the login screen. So that's what you are going to see in one of our videos at later point of time. But that's what I just wanted to cover as part of this session. Hope it helps, and thanks for watching, and have a good day. Take care.